right. Can everybody hear me? Wonderful. Thank you for sticking around for the final panel and for your presence and your contributions for all of this week. We are very, very honored and lucky to have all of you here with us today. So today we're finishing with kind of the future of animal studies. I think when we were designing this conference, we were really thinking about what it means to reach 20 years of AASA and thinking about where we've come from and the key ideas that are in our fields, all of the people who've come before us that have let us have this beautiful, vibrant community and this amazing scholarship that we get to inherit when we look at our work. And to end, I thought it would be really nice for us to look to the future. And when I think about the future, I think about our bright and shiny early career researchers who have very recently survived the abyss of PhD life. And have come with brand new ideas and, not the bitterness and baggage that some of us bring. No, but they're fresh and they're new and they're exciting. And when I think about the future, I think it is useful for us to hear from the vantage point of people who haven't come through the neoliberal university too much yet and haven't really been steeped in that, and see what it looks like when you are stepping out into the field fairly fresh, and see what reflections that we do. So, to conclude our celebration of 20 years of AASA, we have some wonderful early career researchers here with us. I put them in alphabetical order in my list, and then I didn't make you sit in alphabetical order, so this pains me greatly. But we have Agata Kowalewska, thank you very much. We have Darren Chang. We have Andrea Stapp, thank you. And we have Natalia Ciecierska-Holmes, thank you. Who are going to share with us some of their reflections on ECR life, what they've been looking at in the animal studies field, what they're excited about, what the challenges are, and just some reflections about how we might work together better in future. But before we get to that conversation, I just want to again acknowledge that we're here on the traditional lands of the custodians of the Toowoomba region and the beautiful kind of airs and waters and lands that we've been walking and learning and experiencing these beautiful relationships on all week, and pay my respects to elders past and present, First Nations peoples here with us today, and anyone watching this stream as well. Okay, so we're doing a little bit of an informal Q&A. We've got 2 microphones, so hopefully we're not going to have too many fights, but we will see. I see fire in the eyes of Agata already. To get us started, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the animal studies work that you do? Do you want to get going down that end? We'll go linear.
Oh my God, okay. Hi, I'm Agata Kowalewska, and I finished my PhD 2 years ago. I'm currently an assistant professor at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland. And are we doing the how you came into the animal studies now? Okay. So I came to animal studies, I guess, more through multispecies studies. So I worked on questions such as trees being killed by bark beetles, trying to think and accept change and death, and not forcing some beings, some ecosystems to live and be in pain, and for that to happen through a lot of pain of many other kinds of being. I've done some work with learning with and about urban animals, farm animals, marine nutrition cycles, and my current project is on cultures beyond humans. So yeah, I'm into conflicts of interest and conflicts that cannot be squared.
Hello everyone, I'm Darren, and I guess I'll start with how I came into animal studies. It was around 2010, 2011. I was doing my undergrad at the University of British Columbia in Canada, and I took a seminar called Political Theory and Non-Human Life. It was taught by political theorist Laura Genera. And around that time, just coincidentally, there was my university, UBC, was being targeted pretty aggressively by an animal rights organization that was challenging animal experimentation happening at the university. And so we, as a group of students and the professor, thought that as a collective of people exploring human-animal relations critically, we should also engage with that. And so I kind of came into animal studies, I guess, through protesting animal experimentation in some sense, that it was a foot in academia and a foot in the activist scene from the beginning. But I think in the general sense, it was really just kind of random that, it was these kind of more senior established scholars opening up opportunities as kind of their kind of side interests and the kind of research they were interested in at the time. And I also just kind of rolled this wave of surging interest in animal studies throughout the 2010s. So that's kind of how I came into animal studies. And yeah, in terms of my own research interests, my background is in political theory. I did some field work at a farmed animal sanctuary as part of my PhD research. But in general, I think the bigger picture of my interest is about how we can amplify the agency and resistance of non-human animals, and how we can learn from other animals and what we might be able to learn from them that might help humans expand our imaginations of how we might act better in solidarity with other animals. So that's me.
Hi everyone, I'm Andi. I am not bright, shiny or new. I'm ancient, but I am new to academia. So I guess for me, how did I come to animal studies? That's a really interesting question. I'm bicultural Māori Dutch, so I tend to think about things like that through a First Nations lens. So animal studies itself, I think, is probably more of a Western construct. So therefore, I would say I came to animals through inheritance. I came to the more than human world through having an ancestor who was a mountain and an ancestor who was a river, and therefore all of the entities connected to both of those sites being my kin. So it's a very kind of maybe a very different way of looking at it through that. To the field of animal studies, all through my academic life, inevitably I've turned everything I can possibly toward animals, no matter what I've studied. So creative writing is my field, but I have studied comparative religion, and no matter where I went or what I did, inevitably it involved animals. Even in education, I'm a teacher in secondary schools, and now a teacher at the University of Canberra in Indigenous Studies, creative writing and literature. But really, it's a story about a Wiradjuri woman who had to move to Queensland, actually, to be with whānau or family, and said to me, will you care for Bobby? Bobby was her then 7-year-old rabbit. And when she gave him into my care, she did so with custodial obligation to love him in life and death. And it was a huge responsibility. And when he passed, about 18 months later, I had to find a way to grieve for him. And I moved into Māori methods of grieving that are normally reserved for humans. And so there became my standpoint for a different way of enacting Māori ways of being for the more than human, and particularly for rabbits. So I have a very marginal Māori perspective around how I am within human animal studies, and I must always declare that. I'm very different from the ways that I am are very different from other Māori scholars, but I see my work as evolving how First Nations work with and for the more than human world.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Natalia. I guess I'll start a bit with my journey into animal studies. I did a master's in political science in Berlin at the Humboldt University, and what I was really interested in was food and care and the interconnections between the two, and I did a lot of work in food politics and looking at sort of alternative spaces of food production. And I didn't really realize at the time, but looking back now, animals were always there, but very much on the periphery. And it wasn't until my master's thesis when I was researching alternative superfood politics, so looking at how people were sort of like foraging for berries and foods that they considered healthy but also meaningful to them in alternative practices. And one of my participants said that they fed superfoods to their dog. And I remember being like, wow, oh my gosh, like, yeah, the dog, okay, cool. And I was actually way more interested in what the dog was eating than what the human participant was eating. And I think I had this sort of quite big realization at that point that I hadn't ever considered dog food as food because I hadn't ever considered dogs as eaters. And it really hit me sort of how anthropocentric a lot of my practices had been and my research had been up till that point. And so then for my PhD, I researched dog feeding, and I'm interested in the sort of complexities of feeding and caring for the companions who we live alongside with. And I've just finished my PhD in May this year. I did my graduation in September, which was very fun, got to wear the fun hat. And now working a lot of jobs and trying to sort of work out what the next steps are. Cool.
So it's a bit presumptuous, but I want to ask what you love about the animal studies field, assuming that you do love it. And if not, you will have to leave the couch.
Yeah.
We can go linear if you like.
Yeah.
Oh, I meant like Natalia.
Oh, go
The
back.
other way.
Okay. I love coming to AASA. I've also been to the British Animal Studies Network, involved in the British Animal Studies Network. My PhD was across both the UK and Australia. And both associations, both networks, are wonderful groups of people. I feel like in terms of the spaces that we're in, I love the kinds of conversations that we can have, and I don't think I have many other spaces where there's openness and critical thinking and reflection and creativity and art and just so much all bundled together. And in terms of animal studies as a field, I found it to be a place where I think really important questions are being asked that are really important for the kinds of worlds that we want to create, but also critically reflecting on what we need to move beyond.
All that. I'll also add that I love the diversity and the ability to network. And also, I know when I came to the conference 2 years ago, I was very lonely at my university doing my PhD. I had a couple of people there who were very supportive, but other people just thought I was super weird. And a dear friend of mine and member, Dr. Lara Drew, said, "You must go. These will be your people and you will be okay." So I was really apprehensive, but when I came to the conference 2 years ago, immediately I was welcomed in. I just felt like I was safe. I could talk about things and people wouldn't think I was crackers. Not that we're not crackers, but you know what I mean. For me, different perspectives are exceptionally important to my work because I'm really interested in adaptation and transformation of thought. So I find that here. But I'm really excited about meeting people in the collaborations post here as well, leaving here, and the relationships keep going. And of course that's an Indigenous ontological thing, is when you connect with someone, you're increasing relationships, and that's the most important thing, more than an increase in things or whatever, like ownership of stuff. It's the increase in relationships that matter. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think echoing what Natalia and Andi have just said, I'm just really glad that the field exists. That's what I love about it. But I also love the fact that, and this is kind of what Dinesh had talked about in the first keynote, is that over time it has become more critical. And I think the more critical direction that animal studies has gone in is also reflective of the diversity and the inclusion of different kinds of ideas. And so I think there's this kind of growing recognition that, because animal studies, despite having been on the fringes for so long, is also not the only kind of critical field of study that is under attack by more neoliberal institutions and far-right resurgence and things like that. So I think just that kind of inclusionary tendency within animal studies to include like gender studies, critical race studies, and bring these different forms of knowledge and indigenous knowledge together. I like the direction that has gone in that way.
Absolutely, all of that, and I just wanted to say I was really endeared again to this field, but also to this community specifically. I'm a very new member. When we listened to the opening panel with Yvette and Dinesh, and to realize that this field and this way of thinking is really built on politics, on a very specific tradition of commitment to various forms of living and being, and that we don't have to like bang our heads against a concrete wall, but there is really a lot of people to come into discussion with who thought these things and about these problems in many different contexts and in many different moments, and it just feels a lot less alienating that it can be, I guess, in some other spaces of environmental humanities.
That's all very lovely, thank you. What kind of challenges do you foresee for animal studies scholars now and into the future? Do you think there are any, or is it like smooth sailing from here?
Does anyone want to start? Should I start? Okay. Well, lots of challenges. The one is kind of a little bit smaller, and the other one's a little bit bigger that I wanted to chat about today. The first one is, I kind of failed to mention, I'm a philosopher and an artist by training. But a lot of the work that we do and the work I do is transdisciplinary, and we often, many of us I know, do field work and work with people from different so-called life sciences. And I think one of the challenges for the field is holding all of these perspectives in at once. And I feel like sometimes we get perhaps a bit too critical of some of the other fields. And I think it's more productive to, rather than, I don't know, criticize biology for the use of the term species, is to, you know, take the first biologist you can find and ask them what do they think about the term species. Because my experience has been that the first biologist will tell you, well, there is no such a thing as species. And I think it's way more productive to think with these other disciplines. But yeah, there is like no discipline of biology. There is like individual biologists and individual like traditions of thought and individual groups. And to really deeply engage. And it's just so difficult when you have to think deeply with so many disciplines at once. But yeah, I think we can do a little bit better job in that regard. And the other thing is a little bit more, I guess, conceptual. It's that, and I find I often struggle with this, that I arrive at a problem and I'm like, oh my God, this is just messy, okay, and it's tangled. And everything's just messy and tangled. But I feel like it can be a little bit counterproductive. And I feel like we should be trying to be productive and propose some kinds of solutions, not just show holes in the world. Because I really think we owe it to the different forms of life and being that it's our privilege to think with and work with. And so through all these tangles, I think, again, it kind of goes back to like holding all these many thoughts at once. And I feel like sometimes we keep perfecting terms and like coming up with new terms, because yeah, all the ones we use get like heavy and dirty and awful so quickly. But then I feel like sometimes some of the questions that it feels like we answered, or like the field answered, or like some people, wonderful people, answered like 20 years ago, but these problems sneak back in because the new terms we're coming up with and that are proliferating are letting some of these other like old problems back in, and it's like, you know, whack-a-mole kind of thing. So yeah, I think a little bit less perfection, but like holding on to the commitment that I know is in this field to the material and more than material, because all these beings, including humans, are more than their bodies. They live these complex mental, spiritual, situated, relational lives. So yeah, a commitment to these ways of beings, I think, is what should be there rather than the terms. The words are are secondary, I think. As Madonna said, words are useless, especially sentences. Thank you.
You can jump in.
Sorry, I'm breaking the line. I just wanted to jump in on the first point you made about sort of openness to other ways of thinking and certain disciplinary norms. And something that I think is a real challenge is sort of the divide between science and society and the way that we deal with scientific narratives and discourses in our work. And I think, Alex, your presentation about sort of entomology and where social science meet was a really beautiful example of how we can take forward some of these ideas but also challenge them simultaneously. And I mean, something that, and we've spoken about this before, but I mean, at the University of Adelaide, where I'm based, there are so many people doing research with and that involves animals, also in conservation science, also in other spaces. And I've been to some of the talks held there where, you know, there's things that I've found really troubling and really uncomfortable, and I haven't quite had the language or the way to engage with that kind of knowledge. And I think I completely agree. I think sometimes there's a bit of a closing off of like, maybe we don't want to deal with those kinds of ideas or those kinds of people. And I think we need to lean in more to that and sort of engage. I was speaking to Tamako, who's my buddy, who's a veterinarian, and we were having such a wonderful chat about, you know, euthanasia in practice, in veterinary practice. And these discussions are really hard, but I think they need to be had. And having a language and a way of talking across is really important. But yeah, sorry.
Andi, do you have challenges?
Yeah, I think just riffing off that as well, from a First Nations perspective, and I'm always going to speak from that because that's where I'm positioned. Tyson Yonka-Porter, who I spoke about yesterday, and is an Indigenous scholar and knowledges expert, Aboriginal man from the Appalach clan. He has proposed an idea of becoming a complexity agent, and I strive to act as a complexity agent within all of my research, and that means it's really important that I connect with people who are like me, unlike me, in my system and beyond, and that through our interactions, my job is to listen deeply, to exchange knowledge, resources, and energy, but to diversify my difference through connections with people who are very different to me. And I think that's what you guys are talking about. And not necessarily, and I spoke about this yesterday as well, not critiquing, because what we're trying to do here is build the relationship, because it's through the relationship with others that conversation and information will flow, and that what we're looking for within that, again, is the aggregate narrative of ideas that can come together out of those very disparate conversations towards adaptation and hopefully transformation. So I will sometimes put myself in situations where I am talking to people who completely disagree with my point of view. In fact, I seek them out, and through my research and my PhD, I've spoken to many people, including many First Nations people in Australia, who completely disagree on my point of view about rabbits and invasive species. But through those conversations, our relationships, personal relationships, have grown to the point where there is this mutual respect. They'll sometimes call me up and say, Andi, I thought of you the other day because I saw a rabbit running across the road. And I now kind of feel a kinship to rabbits because of you. And can you see what I mean about how the conversation is shifting here through the growth of the relationship, through taking the time to speak deeply and to connect deeply with others in a network of relations?
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting conversation. And even though we kind of rehearsed a little bit, I didn't expect so much of it to be directed towards kind of the external relationships between animal studies and other areas. I guess because, yeah, I was thinking about that question more in relation to the internal aspects to animal studies. And so I feel like obviously there are the challenges of just having limited resources and opportunities, especially with all the restructuring happening at the universities and things like that. But I also feel like there's this tension where, I think animal issues are horrific, and there's this always this kind of sense of urgency to address them, and there's this kind of demand and pressure to respond to animal issues in urgent ways. But I think it's also very important for us to not succumb to the pressures of the kind of both slow and fast violence of existing systems, which Colin talked about in his talk about koalas, for those of you who were there. And so I think if we were to think of critical animal studies or animal studies more generally as a political or social movement, and then we do need to think about our relationships more intergenerationally, and think about how we might foster animal studies scholars and researchers emerging in the future. And I think that's definitely a major challenge, is that I think often because of the pressures and demands, we have this we respond in really kind of immediate and urgent ways that might not be conducive to fostering, to slow down and foster better relationships. And so for me, I feel like as much as I understand when people identify as independent researcher after they've left certain institutions, and it's kind of identifying this kind of independence from existing institutions, I think it would be really interesting for me as someone who's ready to enter that kind of an identity, I suppose. As cheesy as this might sound, I think it would be cool to identify myself as a dependent or an interdependent researcher, because I do think that's, so I might actually end up doing that on my whatever CV or something. So I think, I don't know, I hope that spoke to some of the challenges.
Thank you. I feel like that leads really nicely into my next question, which is, what are you excited about? What kinds of developments would you like to see? Intergenerational relationships, it would be great. Relationship building sounds like a big thing. What kinds of exciting things have you come across that you want to see us develop more? What opportunities do you see?
Should I go first? I think one of the things, one of the possibilities, I suppose, moving towards the future is we might start seeing more of a decentering of the university within animal studies research, if that's not already happening. And I think there's a lot of potential for more collaborations through NGOs, or maybe even more just informal collaborative networks. And kind of speaking as someone who's done research with farmed animal sanctuaries and interested in that kind of research, I've also noticed that was really encouraging for me to see farmed animal sanctuaries interested in participating in research. And for those of you who know Vine Sanctuary, based in the US, in Vermont, they've kind of established themselves as a kind of a hub for different kinds of research related to sanctuaries, and offering their own sanctuary as like a research site, but also developing resources and generating knowledge in these kinds of ways. So I think that's kind of an interesting example. And I guess, actually I'll leave it there.
Okay. I guess sort of going off the back of what Darren said about collaboration and collectivity. I wasn't sure I was going to say this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to plug an idea that we've been brainstorming over the last few days. Sorry, Alex is laughing. We were having a chat in our little ECR pad about side quests and all of these sort of ideas that go to die. I have something called this. I have a document called the Cemetery of Ideas, where like some ideas should stay there, but some I think could be resurrected. And we were talking, and I was saying, like, how it's really sad when you have all these ideas and things you want to do, and maybe you don't have time, and maybe you don't have the skills, and maybe you don't have just friends to do it with. And as someone who's working 3 different jobs right now, I have half a day a week of free time where I've left that for my own writing and any other kind of work. But I don't really have time to do these side quest projects and resurrect them in the way that I would like. And we were talking about having a forum or a group or a collective where we get together and we all bring our little side quests and we just work on them together. And it could be an hour or 2 a week, or it could be however long you'd want to do it. You could have, it makes me think a little bit of like a hackathon. And you just get together and you have some time to all input into a project. And I think that could be a really cool way of navigating some of the issues around precarity that we're seeing, where we are time poor and financially also quite poor.
I love that idea. Can you send that to the committee?
Yeah, I think we should do it. I think that could be a really cool, like I don't know what we call it, side quest collective. I don't know.
Working bees a bit on the nose.
Working bee, yeah. Okay.
Lovely.
I think that idea is great because I think it also, if it was at a point in time and people could hop into that, it would be another way of connecting. Because it's a long time between drinks, like two years before. I know some people here know each other, but other people might have come for the first time. So if there's a way to connect, and I'm looking at Natalie because Natalie would also like dancing. And maybe dancing at the next conference in 2 years. But yeah, so I love that as well. And for me, really, it was about how can we maintain the connection. Because as I said, coming in, it can be lonely to do this work. Yeah.
Thank you. Absolutely, yes. I agree. It's so, yeah. Okay, never. I'll not going to repeat all the wonderful points. So try and say something something else. So I'm really excited, especially at this conference. I have been really excited about the attention of so many of you, us, to the different beings that we're working and learning with. And there were several talks about the necessity to keep a distance and not to treat animals like always willing participants of what we want to think about, of what like our ideas are. And I think this is really exciting to be thinking with all of you about this. And what I felt like was quite a broad recognition of, yeah, again, animals being more than bodies, being these relational beings. And the readiness, and that was, I think, really visible both in Danny's keynote, but also in many of the other presentations, the readiness to stay with the pain of many of the stories that we're working with. And I think this is really crucial to the way we do scholarship, because quite often we are discouraged from it. And we had such a wonderful discussion yesterday also with Felicity, and thank you for that discussion, that nobody else is going to create spaces where it's, I mean, in like mainstream academia at least, where it's, okay to be sad, it's okay to cry. It's like, how would you not cry about all these things? And so many of us cried during so many of these presentations, and I think it's wonderful that this is welcome, and it's we should really foster that, and I'm really excited about that space of doing scholarship differently. And I'm also super excited about the fact that so many that the discussions are happening beyond just charismatic species, and so it feels like there is a real recognition of the, again, many different, I keep repeating myself, many different ways of being, but yeah, it's moved so far beyond what one might think is just like traditional animal studies. I think this is absolutely fascinating, and the methods, the attention to methods that I really see in the field. And this is not new, this is kind of like, but this is like I feel like it's a new wave of interest in methods. And I think that's really exciting, and hopefully this can help navigate some of because also the methods, I guess, as the more we kind of reach beyond just the very traditional academia, kind of like what you guys mentioned, that the precarity of the current employment situation, I'm just beyond lucky to have a position. It's a fixed term. I only have a job for 2 more years, then like, I don't know. But at least for those 2 years, I really can think about these things. And I know it's an incredible privilege that very few of us get. But I also know, like throughout the 10 years it took me to do my PhD, partially because like there wasn't any funding and I had to have like different jobs and look for other opportunities and stuff like that. But hopefully I see some ways of navigating it also through working through other institutions and people getting positions at art institutions, which are obviously super underfunded as well. But there is this like weaving and thinking together, and I also don't want to be like super yay hopeful about something that's just profoundly sad and awful and disgusting. But yeah, I don't know, maybe a little bit also happy that there are ways of navigating it despite all the disgusting stuff.
No, I'm really pleased to hear so much discussion of, I think, community and relationship and collaboration, because I think, this isn't my panel, I'm sorry, but increasingly, as we see neoliberalism roll in, I just think we're increasingly kind of structured in a way that encourages us to work individualistically and for ourselves and in competition. And anywhere we have an opportunity to build community and relationship is not just important for our souls and for our scholarship, but also one of the very small sites of resistance that we kind of have left as the universities squeeze in on us. And I really love these ideas of pooling resources that go against that kind of selfishness and ownership of ideas. So I'm really inspired to hear all of this. Thank you very much. We have one last question, and then I'm going to open for about 10 minutes of question time. If you feel a question bubbling up, might I suggest we navigate the scary stairs sooner rather than later? So gravitate. Now is your 10-minute warning. So if you were going to leave us with a kind of a parting idea or a parting message to take with us, no pressure, but this is the last session of a very amazing conference. What would you like to kind of plant into our minds to kind of percolate away as we go off on our individual journeys after this? You look keen, Andy? No? Oh, sorry, I interpreted your hand.
Mine's going to be controversial, so I'll go. I'm just going to go, and I've written this down because it is controversial, I feel. I'm going to say that I'm conscious of skepticism of white ontologies of relationality. I'm looking at people now because a lot of us use them. And I just want to put out there that the Western subsumption of ontologies of relatedness becomes convenient sometimes for overlooking the epistemic and structural injustices inflicted upon people of colour, which are implicit in the building blocks of modernity. And there I'm really citing work by Chapato and Chandler. And I just want to say for First Nations peoples like myself, and to remind you, and I know you know this anyway, that ontologies and epistemologies of relationality commences from an epistemic root of kinship of creation. So to really declare the difference, First Nations people have been using ontologies of relatedness for millennia, forever. But post-humanism and other concepts like those have moved towards ontologies of relationality, and sometimes I really wonder why. And I propose perhaps that because non-Indigenous peoples, and I'm not talking about people here, but I'm just saying generally, and everybody's different, I understand that, but perhaps it's because people are facing the possibility of annihilation due to climate destruction, and they're scouring for solutions to offset the precarity. But I also want to point out that First Nations peoples have experienced genocide and continuing threats of erasure since colonisation, and their conceptions of the Anthropocene, or any other name you want to call it, Cthulhucene, etc., Capitalocene, are very different. And that at the heart of this critique of perhaps white ontologies of relatedness or post-humanism is that despite striving to move beyond the human nature divide, it has the potential to replicate oppressions between self-determining subjects and other determined subjects. It's a heavy thought, but...
I think we can end there. Shall I go? I really don't want to follow you, Andy, but that was beautiful. Thank you so much. And so,
I didn't just come up with that.
No, yeah. Thank you so much. It's so, so important. I think the thing that I wanted to think about and maybe leave this conversation with is the idea of grief, but also hope. And I've been thinking a little bit actually since the sort of final supervision that I had with all of my supervisors that was meant to be a like, celebrate Natalia submitting her thesis. And it kind of became a space where my supervisors, who are all sort of later career researchers, just started grieving the state of institutions, of academia, of all the things going on across both the UK and Australia and the world. And I remember having a little moment of being like, actually, this is my time. But it became, I was like, this is more important. This space, this needs to happen. And I think what I'm observing, this may be completely wrong, but yeah, what I'm observing is there's sort of different layers of grief operating through the academy, but also within different disciplines. And I think for sort of the later career researchers, it's grief for an institution that was. And I think as early career researchers, what we're grieving is a dream of what we thought we could have had, and that doesn't exist anymore, and it is something that's quite tough. And we've had I've had several conversations about. And I'm going to cheat and read someone else's work for the final thing that I wanted to say with this. But whenever I've sort of been thinking about grief and hope, I come back to feminist Rebecca Solnit's work around hope in the dark. And I was coming back to this Guardian article that she wrote in 2016, reflecting on her work around the Bush administration and then when Trump's administration, and I just see these sort of like cycles of hope and despair. But I just wanted to read something that she wrote because I think it helps to move through some of this pain. And she writes, "It's important to say what hope is not. It's not the belief that everything was, is, or will be fine. The evidence is all around us of tremendous suffering and destruction. The hope I'm interested in is about broad perspectives with specific possibilities, ones that invite or demand that we act. It is also not a sunny, everything is getting better narrative, though it may be a counter to the everything is getting worse one. You could call it an account of complexities and uncertainties with openings. Critical thinking without hope is cynicism, but hope without critical thinking is naivety," the Bulgarian writer Maria Popova recently remarked. And Patrisse Cullors, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, early on described the movement's mission as to provide hope and inspiration for collective action, to build collective power, to achieve collective transformation, rooted in grief and rage, but pointed towards vision and dreams. It is a statement that acknowledges that grief and hope can coexist. And this text for me reminds me that this isn't just happening here and to us, but we need to reach out and be allies to all different kinds of movements. And as Andi says, I think it's a much bigger question than just here. But I think we can move with grief. And I am hopeful about what we can do in this field as well.
Well, that's just mean to make somebody follow after two such wonderful points. Yeah, my only last thought, I really didn't feel in, that's the one I have the least notes for, I really did not know what to say. But yeah, I think we just need to keep more than one thought in at once and stay with these tensions and but not like just stay with the trouble. I mean, I do like the Haraway's work a lot, but not just stay with the trouble, but really think about the consequences of our scholarship and of these different kinds of relations and all the platforms that we can use and all the different privileges and small spaces where we do have some power. Everybody has some power somewhere and some opportunity to do something somewhere. I feel like as early career scholars really can't, even though sometimes the systems, I think, make us believe that, like, yeah, like now we should just like fight tooth and nail for like the positions, and then like once we reach the positions of power, like, yeah, well then we're gonna do the politics. But like then we're not gonna do the politics. It just doesn't work like that. So yeah, just use whatever little power, because it just feels it might mean something, as I'm sure many of you have experienced. It does mean sometimes to somebody or some being, it just really means a lot. What was a very small gesture for somebody else. And yeah, both materially and epistemically, and just thinking and being with everybody in some kind of solidarity. I don't know, sorry, I'm bubbling now. There you go. Mumbling.
Yeah, I guess I'll start out by saying that as someone who's about to finish his PhD, I've been extremely fortunate to have had Dinesh Wadawal and Danielle Salameyer as my supervisors. They've just been incredible, and I consider myself having been extremely fortunate for the most part. I've also had a good scholarship that enabled me to come to Australia and do my PhD. But I also recognize that I mean, the state of academia is at a point now where if anyone asks me about whether it's a good idea to do a PhD, I would never say like no straight up, but what I always tell people these days is to have a backup plan, or just like be so well resourced already in a way where if things go bad or go south, you can just exit and not having to feel too bad about it. But I've been reflecting on this and about what if somebody was to ask me, you know, what if I would recommend pursuing a PhD or any kind of degree in animal studies or critical animal studies, and I realized that I would never say no to that. Like my answer would be extremely different, because I feel like there is something unique about this experience and this particular field of study, and so yeah, so I've been kind of like reflecting on why that is, and so I guess part of what I'm trying to say is, yeah, it comes back to the passion of the work and just the importance of keep fighting the good fight, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing all of your thoughts. We have about 5 minutes for questions. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask our panel? Go for it.
Hello. You all sort of spoke quite eloquently about AASA and animal studies being a bit of a home for us, but also about the need to speak across the ditch and these ditches and these sort of epistemological differences that we find with other fields. And I think something I struggle with is working out where that boundary sits and how we juggle wanting to keep spaces like this a home at the same time as feeling through what might be lost if we don't engage more with the sort of outside, beyond the fence, if you will. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm interested to hear what you all think about that.
I don't know.
I think for me personally it's imperative, because as I said, I'm acting as a complexity agent and I'm working within Indigenous ways of being through doing that. So that kind of propels me to speak with people who think very differently to me. And if Tyson Yunkaporta actually models this through a podcast called The Other Others, where he puts himself, I think sometimes into quite precarious situations. I don't know if anyone's heard him speak on The Other Others, but it's as close to a modern day, I think, campfire yarn as you can get. And that's why he won't do television really, but he will do podcasts. And that is to try and find a way, a point of commonality through all of the difference. And again, it is to grow the relationship. Otherwise, we just have these huge, vast chasms of difference. And where there is that difference, we're never going to connect with others.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's sort of having space for difficult conversations, but also space to reflect on those conversations. I know that sort of this support group here has been a space for that for me, where sometimes you can come back from having had a conversation and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And yeah, I mean, I've sort of been someone that's always just lent into things and then dealt with the consequences later emotionally. And, you know, I research raw meat. It's something that I find very tricky. But yeah, speaking to a wide variety of people and retaining a sense of openness while keeping a safe space, I think to reflect on those discussions, is really important.
Thank you. Sorry, I panicked at first. Thank you so much for this. And I love thinking across the ditch. Although it made me think sometimes maybe we can like both grab a shovel and just keep digging. Yeah, and think kind of, I don't know, just makes you think about, you know, the different layers that you then start unearthing. So maybe through like, trying to dig together, and through like physical labor and sweat and being together as bodies in the dirt, perhaps, in these very material lived practices. I think a lot of the politics comes through, and I think that can be a way to think across these differences.
I don't have much.
We've got time for one more question if anyone's got one.
Hi, great discussion. You're talking about the side quest research. I was wondering if you wanted to share anything that you were, to all of you, that you would want to research if you had the time, something that is topical or that is playing on your mind that you really want to look into deeper.
Do you want to start? Do you have a favorite?
I don't want to put Darren on the spot, but do you want to share your idea? I think it's incredible.
Yeah, we were having this conversation last night. I was interested in some sort of interactive mapping project that, for those of you who are familiar with this website called Feral Atlas, but almost like more of a critical animal studies version of it that kind of traces the movement of animal exploitation across the globe. And yeah, it was one of my kind of ideas that went into the graveyard, but it could be a cool side quest and something that is highly collaborative. And yeah, that's something like that.
I also have been thinking about different sort of like artistic projects, and I have no skills in art creation. I mean, I like ideas, but yeah, I just, so thinking about, I've had this idea for a cockroach comic, thinking about cockroach death and dying and how we can move away from just the automatic like kill reflex that a lot of humans just tend towards. And this came out of an observation of a cockroach coming up from my drain, and my housemate just immediately grabbed this spray that I didn't even know we had. And I was like, stop. And I think just, yeah, thinking about ways that different kinds of artistic representation can bring out sort of like lived experiences of the non-human animals who we live with in our homes every single day. And but I can't draw, so but yeah, so things like that where there's sort of skills and thinking across. I know Alex has an idea for a very cool cookbook. You can share it if you want, or not share. But I think it's like, the idea would be you just bring anything and we'll sort of work out who has the skills to do what, who wants to be involved. You wouldn't have to be involved in everything necessarily, but it's sort of if it fits and aligns. And I think also would be just such a cool way to think about things that maybe you haven't thought about before, but all interconnected.
And I really love the idea of perhaps making it as a website, because I think one of the, you know, being a scholar based in Poland, one of the issues that I've been coming across throughout most at least all the parts of my academic career that were based in Poland and not in some of the Western institutions, is lack of access to publications. So I think creating these open source resources is really important, and is the one small thing that that we can do. Obviously, like, you also have to think about like employment, and that you will need publications that usually are not open access, but if we are doing these things, let's make them as open access as possible and as accessible to people who haven't had the privilege to, you know, learn the complex concepts, and yeah, just make it really like inviting for people from different kinds of backgrounds and coming from different kinds of like thinking traditions and knowledges.
I really love the concept of call and response as a way of inviting people into a yarn or a whiti kororo. So, you know, I don't know how we could work that, but for instance, writing something and someone else following that thread and doing, like, just commenting back in response, and then that going on to another person as a way of keeping everybody connected.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing all of their thoughts. I have some very brief final words, and then we're going to run Andi to the airport because she very kindly changed her travel plans to be here with us today. Would you like to stay for our final comments? Yeah, I feel less lonely, that's fine. Can we get Rebecca to come down to the front? Thank you. Before you get here, I just want to again thank everyone for joining us, for bringing all of your beautiful ideas, for making this community that we've just heard is very valued and very integral to the way that we work as animal studies scholars. AASA is always looking for ways for people to get more involved, so please, we have our AGM coming up. If you're interested in joining our committee, come and ask one of us. We're always very happy to talk about it. If you'd like to be secretary, we have a wonderful secretary who had so much fun, she felt bad hoarding the job. So if you might like to be secretary, that is up for grabs soon. And please keep an eye out if you're an early career researcher. Next year we'll be having a Siobhan O'Sullivan Early Career Researcher Prize. So if you have something you might like to submit for that, please keep that in mind as well. But we just wanted to finish again by thanking Rebecca for all of her work in putting this together. We have some treasures that we would like to gift you as a token of our appreciation. You've been working all year. I was going to say all week, but you've been working all year to put this together. And I think this is amazing. This is beyond, I think this might be my favorite AASA conference. Now that Dinesh has gone, I can say that. So we really appreciate everything you've done. Chantal, fur is running. And we just wanted to give you something to remember us by when you're very tired and resting. And maybe we can just finish with a round of applause for Rebecca and all of her work, and for everyone here. Okay, thank you. Please go and enjoy lunch. We will see you all at lunch. If you are lingering around tonight, some of us will be having dinner. You are very welcome to join. If you're sitting there thinking, that doesn't mean me because she's never met me, it exactly means you. So please just come and find one of us. Alex is staying, Natalia's staying, a few of us are staying. Find us at lunch. We're more than happy to hang out with you tonight. Sure.
If you have artwork in the exhibition, feel free to pull it down during lunch and ask for help if you need help to do that during lunch. Thank you. That's it. Yeah.
I'll take my microphone back then. Thank you. Be free.